Listen carefully. In the winter of 1893, a letter arrived at Boston City Hall. It was unsigned, the handwriting frantic, ink smeared as if the writer's hand had trembled with terror. Asterisk, do not believe the seminary is holy. It is not a place of God. It feeds on us. Asterisk. At first, officials dismissed it as the ramblings of a lunatic. But 2 weeks later, a constable was sent to investigate Sterling Seminary, a secluded religious school in the Berkshires. He never returned. His body would later be found in the nearby river, his lungs filled with ash instead of water. The Sterling Seminary was founded in 1848, funded by one of Massachusetts' wealthiest families, the Hawthornes. On paper, it was a sanctuary of learning and piety. In reality, it became the stage for one of the most insidious campaigns of psychological control and greed ever documented. Tonight, we unseal the records. Tonight, you will hear the truths they buried beneath 1,000 sermons. The seminary's architecture was designed to inspire awe, a sprawling stone complex crowned with an octagonal chapel, its windows made of imported Venetian glass. But locals spoke of strange sounds echoing from its halls at night, low chanting, metallic scraping, and cries that didn't sound human. Father Nathaniel Hawthorne, the seminary's founder, had an unsettling charisma. His eyes seemed to pin you in place, and his voice, silky, deliberate, could sway even the most skeptical minds. Under his leadership, Sterling's reputation grew. Wealthy families sent their sons to be purified in its halls. But what they didn't know was that each purification came with a cost. Students were subjected to rituals masked as penance exercises. Days of starvation. Hours of kneeling on frozen stone floors. Isolation chambers designed to quiet the sinful mind. Parents were told it was necessary to prepare their sons for greatness. In truth, it was breaking them. By 1870, Sterling Seminary controlled more than education. Father Hawthorne had established a network of donors, men of influence who attended secretive midnight gatherings in the chapel. These weren't prayer meetings. They were auctions. Property seized from expelled students. Family heirlooms donated as acts of contrition. Even the boys themselves were bartered, offered as unpaid apprentices to factories owned by Hawthorne's associates. Some students never returned home. Their families received polite letters, asterisk, your son has chosen a life of service abroad. Do not seek him further. Asterisk, when a few fathers attempted to investigate, they too vanished. And still, the seminary's enrollment list grew. The cracks began to show in the winter of 1884, when a student named Elias Moreland escaped. Gaunt, barefoot, and raving, he stumbled into the nearby town of Canaan screaming about the black cellars and the ash-marked men. The sheriff dismissed him as mad, but townspeople whispered about Elias' frostbitten feet and the raw ligature marks around his wrists. Before they could question him further, Elias vanished from the town's infirmary. Some said Father Hawthorne himself came for him. Others claimed Elias was dragged into the river by pale hands in the night. One thing is certain, every mention of Elias Moreland was erased from Sterling's official records. It's here we must pause. Because what we've uncovered so far is only the surface. Behind Sterling's walls lies a labyrinth of secrets, rituals older than the seminary itself. Hidden chambers beneath the chapel floor. And an artifact so powerful that men were willing to kill for it. Before we descend further, ask yourself, would you have sent your child to Sterling Seminary, or would you have sensed the rot beneath the polished sermons? If you've made it this far, you're not like most. You're ready for truths that burn. Comment below, I will not kneel to prove you're awake. Write it twice to break their hold. Because what comes next is the part they never wanted recorded. Deep beneath the seminary's chapel was a place the students whispered about but never dared approach. They called it asterisk, the hollow. Asterisk. It wasn't on any architectural plan, yet every boy knew the story. If you disobeyed, you were taken there. You'd hear a grinding of iron hinges as the door closed behind you. And when, if, you came back, you weren't the same. Some boys returned pale and silent. Others came back murmuring nonsense about men in masks and a red symbol that burns. A few were never seen again. The official explanation: they'd been transferred to other schools. But the locals knew better. At night, they claimed, faint screams could be heard rising from under the earth. And then there were the ash piles. Tiny mounds that appeared on the seminary grounds after stormy nights. The staff said they were from burnt leaves. But why would leaves contain human teeth? By 1890, Father Hawthorne had become more than a man, he was a legend. His sermons were printed in Boston papers. Politicians sought his counsel. Wealthy families gave him control of their estates, in trust. But behind the facade, a darker truth festered. The seminary wasn't just a school. It was a machine. A machine designed to strip boys of their identities and mold them into something else, obedient servants for Hawthorne's growing empire. Every Sunday, Hawthorne and his inner circle would gather in the octagonal chapel. They claimed to perform cleansing rites. But Elias Moreland's journals, smuggled out before his disappearance, tell another story. He wrote of hooded figures standing in a circle, their hands slick with blood, chanting in a language older than English. And at the center of the chapel floor, a trapdoor, sealed with 7 iron bolts. The trapdoor led to a vault older than the seminary itself. Colonial maps suggest the site had once been sacred to an indigenous tribe, later desecrated by European settlers who built over it. In 1791, an excavation uncovered a stone altar covered in carvings no one could decipher. That same year, the Sterling family, Hawthorne's ancestors, bought the land and buried the site under layers of brick and wood. But Hawthorne never forgot what lay beneath. He believed the altar held power. Power to bind men's wills. Power to extract confessions. Power to summon wealth from suffering. And so he built the seminary, not as a house of God, but as a funnel to feed that altar's hunger. By autumn of 1892, whispers of rebellion began to spread among the students. One boy, Jonathan Price, led a small group planning to expose the seminary's horrors to the outside world. They stole scraps of parchment from Hawthorne's study, revealing land deeds, forged wills, and accounts of missing students. But their plan was discovered. On a cold October night, Price and his conspirators were summoned to the chapel. Locals reported seeing smoke billowing from the chapel roof and hearing low, rhythmic chanting. The next morning, Price's dormitory was empty. Beds made. Belongings gone. The seminary announced that the boys had renounced their studies and fled in shame. But the ash piles returned that night, larger than ever. This is where the story turns. An anonymous informant, believed to be a seminary teacher, sent a package to a Boston newspaper editor. Inside were charred scraps of the boys' journals and a single sentence scrawled in red ink, asterisk, "The altar is awake." Asterisk. The editor tried to publish the story but died in a mysterious carriage accident days later. His office burned to the ground. Every copy of the article was destroyed, except one. That lone surviving draft, hidden for decades in a family attic, was uncovered in 2017 by a historian. It details the rituals performed at Sterling Seminary, the vows of silence, the trials by fire, and the ultimate sacrifice demanded by the altar. It also describes something else. Something unspeakable. But that truth, we'll unearth in the next descent. In 1893, Hawthorne began the selection. Students were divided into 2 groups, the chosen and the condemned. The chosen were told they'd been handpicked for greatness, that they would inherit the Sterling legacy. But the condemned, they vanished. No public ceremony. No letters sent home. No bodies buried in the churchyard. Just whispers of the hollow, and the grinding sound of that ancient trapdoor opening. The locals grew uneasy. Farmers reported flocks of crows circling the seminary grounds for days at a time, screeching as though in warning. Fishermen claimed the river near the school ran dark after heavy rains, as if the soil was bleeding. But the Sterling family's influence silenced all complaints. The sheriff's cousin had been a beneficiary of Hawthorne's trust. The mayor's daughter attended Sterling's Sunday dinners. Even the governor had received generous donations for his re-election. Power protected the predator. That winter, something strange happened. 3 students escaped. They arrived at a Boston parish, frostbitten and half-mad, clutching each other in terror. One boy spoke of tunnels beneath the seminary, lined with cages. Another raved about a red-eyed thing, chained to the altar stone, whispering promises of gold and land in exchange for suffering. The third boy couldn't speak at all. His tongue had been cut out. Father Brennan, the priest who took them in, wrote a single line in his journal before disappearing 2 nights later. Asterisk, the altar feeds, and it never forgets. Asterisk. In early 1894, the Sterling Seminary burned to the ground. Official reports blamed faulty gas lamps. But survivors whispered a different story. They claimed Father Hawthorne and his inner circle had gathered in the chapel for the Great Offering. A ritual meant to bind the altar's power forever to the Sterling bloodline. But something went wrong. The altar turned on its masters. Witnesses saw flames shooting from the chapel roof, forming shapes, faces, screaming in agony. Some say Hawthorne's voice was heard above the crackling fire, chanting even as his flesh burned. And then silence. When the embers cooled, searchers found no bodies, just ash and a single iron key, blackened by the heat. But Hawthorne didn't die. At least, that's what the locals believe. There are stories of a gaunt man in black seen wandering the forests of Massachusetts for decades after the fire. His eyes, they say, glow faintly red in moonlight. And then there are the disappearances. Children. Travelers. Investigators. All vanishing within a 5-mile radius of the seminary ruins. In 1957, construction crews digging near the site uncovered a stone vault. Inside were hundreds of human bones, stacked like firewood. The excavation was halted. The area was declared off-limits. But not before someone found a book. Bound in cracked leather. Its pages filled with names. Dates. And one repeating phrase. Asterisk, the debt is never paid. Asterisk. Today, the Sterling Seminary site is silent. Overgrown. The locals avoid it. But late at night, they say you can still hear chanting rising from the earth. The grinding sound of iron hinges. And sometimes, screams. The altar's hunger was never sated. And the Sterling bloodline? It survived. Descendants of the Sterling family own banks, corporations, and political offices across New England. Their wealth is staggering. Their power, unchallenged. But rumors persist. That the price of their fortune is still being paid. That somewhere, in a hidden room beneath a modern mansion, a stone altar waits. And when the Sterling heirs gather, they still whisper the same ancient prayer. Asterisk, through suffering, we rise. Through blood, we rule. Asterisk. So tell me. Do you think it's all over? Or is the Sterling Seminary horror still unfolding, hidden in plain sight?